Hello, everyone. Welcome back to What the
Jeff
podcast. Yes, we are so excited. I'm really excited specifically because we have the amazing, wonderful Nat Bernstein with us, who is a producer, a writer, a showrunner, and he had a little bit of a special place in my heart because he's known me before I've known me. And before I even talk about him, I would love for Nat to introduce himself and give us a little bit of a background of who you are for our listeners to love you too.
You know, it's really amazing because when you look at Sarah and me, you'd think they're probably very close to the same age. And I know it's shocking to know that, in fact, I'm hundreds of years older than she is. Actually, hundreds. By the way, you forgot to mention I was an actor. That's how I've met your family. I'm a former actor. I'll give you the hopefully the Cliff Notes version of me, but it'll give some insight into how not only my history with Sarah and now my history with Carly, but my history in this business. I came out here from Pennsylvania having absolutely no clue what I was doing, other than I was going to try to do something different with my life before I settled it into my actual life, which I thought would be a teacher. I grew up, like I said, in Pennsylvania. Thought I'd be a guidance counselor. I thought I'd be a coach. I played sports in high school. I loved it. So I thought before I settled into my life, after having gone through 4 years of Penn State University, which is my school and my heart belongs there, I took some acting classes at the end because I thought, well, why not? I may try acting out in California. I'll go out, I'll fail, and I'll come home. But I had a plan, good plan. And as luck and life would have it, I spent a year surviving, only to, at the very end of that year, meet someone at a wedding back in New Jersey who said, hey, you should look up my cousin and my sister. They're both in the business. Now, if any of you have ever done that, you know how uncomfortable it is to meet people who don't know you when they think you're asking for a favor, when really all you're asking is, I just like to meet you and get a sense of what the business is about. And the cousin of this guy who I sort of knew from Penn State because he was the fraternity brother of one of my dearest friends, this cousin turned out to be one of my lifelong friends out here. And she got me a job at Paramount Studios as a production assistant, as a runner, as a gopher, the one at the very, very bottom of the whatever you want to call it, the ladder. But I was able to get into the business that way. And I thought, well, if nothing else, this is incredible. This is perfect. I can go home after this and say, look at this. I met all these actors and stars, and I was around these incredible shows, and how lucky am I? Well, I kept parlaying that job into another job and then another job. And then finally, on a show called Taxi, which you two are very, very young, you might never have ever heard of the show. But I will say this, it's one of the best half-hour comedies that's ever been on television. So I would suggest to you and to your viewers, take a look at it if you can find it, and you can. Again, Taxi. I asked the producers if they could help me get my SAG card, and they did. I was able to get a very small role, and that started to parlay into other jobs as an actor and other jobs. And then I was in an acting class, a wonderful teacher named Gordon Hunt, where I met a dear friend who to this day is one of my oldest and dearest friends, who happens to be Sarah's father. His name was Marcelo. I'm sure you've heard about Marcelo way before this with me. That class, that experience was just, those are some of my oldest and dearest friends in the business, those actors who were with me then. And ironically enough, Marcelo is the only one of all of us, I think now, who is still acting. I was able to find another avenue that I never thought I was ever going to find, which was writing. I started writing in my acting class because at the time, we didn't have cell phones then. We couldn't actually shoot anything for ourselves. We couldn't film ourselves, but what we could do is write something. And one of my friends in class and I sat down and we wrote a play about a couple who the guy can't commit and the woman wants a commitment from him. The comedy, made it a 4-person play. Funny enough, the other 2 actors, one of which was Marcelo. Again, he was going to be in this play with us. My friend Nancy and I, who wrote it, Nancy went on to become and she still is in the soap world. She's an amazing actress, and she's been on General Hospital forever. So my writing life with her sort of stopped. But there was something so exciting about it, and we knew that people wanted to see it, and people loved the scenes that we were bringing in. So I thought, all right, this is a way for me to maybe do something beyond acting, even though I thought, no, all I'm going to do is act. But what happened is I got into an improvisational acting class, met a guy there who became a friend of mine. He said, you want to write something? We ended up writing, of all things, a movie together, which I don't necessarily recommend anymore because it's a lot of work and the success ratio is very, very, very small. But that movie is the one that's right there, right behind me. I'm pointing to it. It's called Opportunity Knocks. That put us on the writing map. It was a good movie. It wasn't the movie that we wrote, which is what always happens with baby writers, and that we get replaced by other writers in the movie world, which was hard, but it didn't matter. It got us in, and it was a paycheck of which I had never seen. I mean, I just thought, wow, you can actually make a living doing this. I mean, acting is fun, but work for hire is very different than when you suddenly have broken through the writing world. That suddenly led to other things. We got an agent. We spec'd. We wrote another script on spec, which I can talk about if you don't know what that means. Essentially, it means you write something that you love, another series that you love, another episode that you create that's based on that series, so that you show other people in the business that you know their tone, you know their characters, and you write a great story. We wrote a Wonder Years, another show that I have a feeling that Sarah and Carly, you might not have ever heard of, but it's another wonderful, wonderful show. Watch it. Again, viewers, The Wonder Years. Wonderful. That got us onto Doogie Howser, which was that show started Neil Patrick Harris when he was 15. So you can see it was a long time ago. But that got us into the writing world. And we spent 4 years there. We wrote 26 episodes of Doogie Howser. And we worked our way up the ladder from where we were staff writers to producers to supervising producers to co-executive producers. And then we were off and we were doing our own thing. We were creating our own shows. So my life has taken so many wonderful turns in that things that I didn't expect to happen have happened. And as I tell all my young actors when I teach, because I love teaching and I'm a teacher now as well, I tell all my actors and my young writers, I will be the bane of your family's existence, because I will tell you that if I can make it, you can make it, which is kind of true. Look, we know how hard this business can be, but people make it every day. Somebody breaks through. So with all the rejection and with all the roller coaster rides and all the no's that we hear, people hear yes eventually. So if you love it and you are passionate about it and you are driven, and I know of no two young, talented women than these two who I'm looking at, when you know you have something special, something that's personal, something that drives you, something that you know needs to be out there in the world, you move on it. And you move on it until you're exhausted by the process. Because at some point, hopefully, you'll hear somebody go, that's a great idea. So that's kind of my life. That's sort of my story. That's how I got to be a showrunner. I've spent I say this and I cannot believe I can say this, 30 something years doing it. Yes, I watched Sarah grow up from a little tiny little girl to an amazing woman. I've seen the immense pride that both of her parents have with her. And Lori, her mom, is just a force of nature. I mean, the Tubert family is, by definition, forces of nature. They know that. And my guess is so is Carly's family. Just absolute forces of nature. And you have to be that in this business. You have to have the confidence and the passion, the drive to know that no matter how many times you hear no, or how many times you hear, yeah, it's not for us, it's not going to stop you. So that is my story. I got lots more to say, but as you know, that's just a long monologue. So I'm going to stop.
That is beautifully said. It's a good reminder why we do what we do and the journey that we've been on. Clearly, I've given up everything in Nebraska and where I had a really good life. I had a good foundation, but I had that instinct. I wanted to see more. I want to contribute more. So you remind me that I'm doing life the right way. So it's nice to hear your story. And hopefully 30 years later, I'll be able to say, wow, where have I been within, the industry within the last 30 years? So
By the way, that's a great point because that is something that so many of us, and it's hard when you're young to go, where will I be in 30 years? What will I want to have accomplished? And we don't think about it when we're really young because we figure our lives ahead of us. And yet suddenly like that, it's gone. And you go and you say to yourself, damn, those regrets are something that, look, I have friends, my best friends in the world, who all went on to their own professions when I was coming out here to be an actor, and they loved me and they teased me nonstop about what I was doing. They couldn't believe it. And frankly, neither could I. And yet, all these years later, my friends have said to me that they are lovingly envious of the fact that I followed a passion. I followed some strange calling that I wasn't born to be an actor. I didn't think to myself, I'm going to be a writer. And yet here I am. So do it. And it's another thing. And I love the fact that I know that both of you are doing it. So
Yeah, well, thanks for that message and that whole intro of your upbringing and story. I always love hearing it, and how you and my dad met. It's always hilarious. And when you two are together, my life is complete. Just the energy you guys pursue, it's amazing. So I'm wondering, now that you've known me my whole life as a deaf person, without Carly, before you met Carly, and now you've met Carly, has your view changed or have you noticed anything different? And also, since you've listened to our podcast, have you learned anything through
oh my
listening?
God, great question. And the answer is yeah. And it's sort of almost embarrassing to admit that I never have ever looked at you, Sarah, as being a deaf person. I just don't think of it that way. I go, mainly because we talk like as if we were just two people who have our hearing. Having met Carly and then watching the two of you work together on your podcasts and here, it's fascinating to me because no, you don't have the experience as a hearing person to spend a lot of time in a world where people don't hear and people can't, and it's fascinating to me. And yet, it took me about the stories that you two have told, and some of the amazing experiences that you've had. I go, I'm a 60-something-year-old human being, and I go, how is it that I have not really thought in those terms or in those experiences? It's wild, and it's something that makes me realize how important it is to to do some work on your own, especially with the two of you.
I love that story. And I love, seeing that and having you notice that and all the work that we put in as deaf people. Cause now I've met all of Sarah's friends and they're like, oh, you know what? I really forgot that Sarah was deaf too. And it's taken them back too. And I've never seen her life before I got here. So
This is just a funny little story to tell you about something that happened to us. I hadn't thought about in forever. Um, Doing a multi-camera comedy, which is on a stage with an audience. We one night had an episode of one of our series, and I can't remember which one it was, and the audience was really enjoying it. But what was happening is that there was a section of the audience that the laughter was delayed. The laughter kept coming after, and we kept thinking, what? Are they not seeing the screen? What's going on? Why are they laughing like essentially 20 seconds after the jokes? Not until we looked up and we realized we had a whole wonderful section of the audience who was deaf, and they were being signed the what was happening. It was eye opening because it was just eye opening for us. We didn't know. I wish we would have known because we would have been able to really move. We would have had so much more of a dialogue with them. because it was so wonderful that they had come to watch the show. But these are things that not enough of us think of when we're doing what we're doing. So you asked that great question, which is the deaf community has every reason to be peeved, certainly, when they see things misrepresented on television. Now, again, we don't all have the same experience. Sarah and Carly, your experiences are very, very different, even just individually, but still, you want to be there to be able to say, okay, if you're going to play this character this way, this is some of the things you need to think about. And that just makes better writing. It makes better stories.
I agree. I'm still very new to the entertainment industry. So there's a lot of things that I've been learning regarding noise. And you remind me of when we were watching a comedy show on TV that had a real live audience. And she mentioned that you can hear people laughing in the background. And I was so mind blown. I was like, wait a minute, you could actually hear a live audience of people laughing on the television. And that's something that is not subtitled. So I never realized that. And that was something that was completely new to me. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's how it makes the show that much funnier when you're listening to people laughing. I'm just laughing because that joke was actually funny. But now you really know that the show is funny because I'm laughing, not because you're hearing other people laugh, but it was just mind blowing for me to learn that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
There are two ways to look at that. That's so fascinating because trust me, and anybody who has been on a sitcom, Sarah has as an actor, I was as an actor, and now as a showrunner, the idea of actual audience laughter, it's too fake sounding to me. It's weird. Carly, you'll get a kick out of this. I think Sarah might know this, that when we go into post-production on the show and we have all of our takes and the editor cuts it all together, and when you're doing a multi-camera show, not a single camera show, not like if you're shooting a movie where you don't have laughter, but a multi-camera show where you do have a live studio audience. You hear laughter and sometimes it's way too big for the joke. The joke was not that funny, trust me. But the audience is laughing because there's what's called a warm-up person who is telling the audience, remember, laugh again when you hear the jokes because we need to have your energy. I hate that because, Carly, you just said it. You laugh because it's funny. Not because somebody's telling you it's supposed to be funny. It's funny. So I used to tell our laugh guy, because there's actually a guy who has a machine that he sits in front of with knobs and levers. And he goes, okay, what they do is they soften out the joke. They soften out the audience laughter so it doesn't sound, oh my goodness, really, really big and then really small. And if a joke, if there was a take where the audience didn't laugh, but there should have been a laugh there, he will add a little something. And I will always say to him, his name is John. I'll never, John Bickelhop. I love John. He's one of the great, great, great guys out there. I'd say, John, you got to pull that back. That sounds fake. And he'd say to me, Nat, it's what the audience did. I can't remove it. And I said, but it sounds fake. And people are going to think we're just adding really bad laughter to a show that didn't really deserve that kind of laugh. So it's really fascinating. And that's why I love that you will laugh, because nobody's telling you to.
Right. And not just that, but sarcastically, as a deaf person, I'm very self-aware when I'm trying to fake laugh to people's jokes generally, because I wonder, I'm like, do you think they could tell it was a fake laugh? Because I don't want to minimize or insult their jokes, but I'm like, oh crap, did they catch that? Do they know? So I always mess with my mind and I'm like, oh, does my laugh sound normal? I really hope so, because honestly, I never know.
That is hysterical. And by the way, I have learned, for me, this is important because when you're an actor, and again, Sarah can relate to this, having been on these sets, I have learned how to fake. I think I do it pretty well. Who knows? a laugh for my actors, because when you're doing what's called a run through, meaning you're rehearsing and you're working out the beats of the story, if your actors get nothing from those of us who are watching, then they think it's not funny. And their performance starts to really fail because they're hearing nothing. And it's you have to figure out a way to invigorate your actors, to keep them aware that, oh, this is supposed to be where it is funny. So, oh, good, I'm hearing laughter. That's why it's so important. We had a producer who had never done this, who whispered to me one day, "Why are you laughing at that? It wasn't funny." And I said, "Because I need to tell my actors that I'm here listening. I know what's not funny. I know when a joke doesn't work. I know when something can work, and I'm not going to take it out. But I'm always going to be there for my actors so that they know they're not alone out there."
One thing I'm curious, because we've had this discussion before, talking about diversity, talking about all your creative things that you have been going on. You said something that really was profound to me, of your acknowledgement when we were talking about a project, and you said, honestly, I don't think I'm the right fit because I think we need strong women, diverse women. How did you get to that point? Because that is really a powerful thing for you to say and acknowledge. So what got you there to say that?
It's not easy, to be honest with you. But the reason I can say it now, and I don't know if I would have said this when I was certainly when I was in my 30s, and most certainly when I was in my 40s, you realize that, for me, I know I've had an amazing career. I know that I have been incredibly fortunate, and I've done it for a lot of years. But I also know that there is ageism in this business. There is. When you get to a certain age, you are viewed differently, wrongfully in a lot of cases, but differently by the younger executives. You just are. Much more in comedy, probably, than in drama. Because in drama, there are a lot of writers of a certain age, and we just keep working because the experience does count for something. A couple things have happened, though, in the last X number of years, and my eyes were open to it. When I was a kid, my partner and I were incredibly, luckily successful through our 30s and into our 40s and even into our 50s. It was easy. They knew who we were. We had a reputation of being successful at what we were doing. That hasn't changed for me. But what has changed is perception, and most importantly, finally the acceptance and desire for diversity. Gender diversity was always talked. Even that was just talked about. Like, we should probably find a female for our staff. Yeah, if you're writing something where you have characters who are a lot of female characters, you should. But this business was run by and dominated by white male writers. It was. And it's probably still has been for a lot of years. But what's happened is that pendulum has moved so that now writers of color, and both diverse gender-wise and diverse cultural-wise, have become increasingly and incredibly more important, and it's necessary. Now, maybe it's gone too far, because so many of my writer friends of color, they can't do more than one show at a time, but they are being asked to keep bringing stuff to us because that's what we need now. Well, that's not fair to them either, because it only sets you up to fail. For me, and the reason I said it to you is because there are certain projects, there are certain projects that need at their core a very strong women writers, showrunners, especially in a show that has at its core strong female characters. You want to have that. I will always be there, and I can co-run anything, and that's what I do with a lot of my friends now on the other side of the business. I'll say, bring on great writers to come play with me, writers of color, writers of certainly a different gender. Bring them on, because that will only make the show better. That's my long-winded answer of saying I'm aware of where I bring a strength to a project, and where I also would need and would expect not necessarily better writers than me, but equally adept writers who bring another sensibility, be they great female writers or great writers of color.
Beautifully said. I always keep saying that we need more deaf writers out there because lately you've seen her audition when she puts on a deaf character. I can instantly recognize when it's written by a hearing person because there's no way that you can translate that to ASL. It's difficult. And it sounds very like something a hearing person would say. That's something that would be never said by a deaf person in real life. And so I always think about how we can open the platform to deaf writers, knowing that there's so many deaf people who want to become writers out there, but they just don't know where to start within the entertainment industry because there's so many different layers. So I'm curious what your perspective is for them and where they could go to get their voices heard for their stories and get their stories out there.
Well, I have a question for you guys because I'm fascinated by that because I think I have two different answers for that. Your deaf writers, what is it? You said something fascinating. How is it that you know that the actor who's acting has something that's been written by a deaf writer? What is it specifically? That's fascinating to me. Can you think of a specific? Because I love that. I didn't know that.
I think that there are some certain words or terms, they're idioms that make absolutely no sense to the deaf community. And yet they want a deaf character to sign that. That's not our idiom to start with. That applies in the hearing world. And it's not something that we can translate into ASL.
Wow. So how would that work? In other words, would a writer, well, obviously what you want a great interpreter who would say through the actor, I don't know how to say it that way. Is that what you're saying? It's like an actor who says, that doesn't sound like something I would say in my character. Is it the same kind of thing where you would actually say, find another word or another phrase?
It's interesting. Honestly, my mind is going blank with the amount of auditions that I've done as a deaf character. But it's amazing to read the scenes that I'm supposed to audition for. It ends up changing the entire audition. So if I get like my lines, I'm not saying what's written on the lines at all. I'm completely revamping it to make sense in ASL. But the casting directors will never know that because typically the casting directors are hearing who don't know signs. So how can they realize that we're completely changing the script, completely revamping it to fit the ASL language? Because it's like she said, the idioms don't work, or there's words that just don't. It's so beautiful in English, but in ASL it makes absolutely no sense.
Wow. That's a learning experience for me right there. I'm so glad I'm doing this podcast just for that reason alone.
But it's more often than not that happens. And with having the authentic deaf writers who write for a deaf character, even if the show itself is not about deaf, if, say, a TV show writes a deaf character in one episode, that's great. But do they have a deaf person writing that character? Do they have a deaf casting director looking to make sure the ASL is perfect? What is the requirements to make sure that it's authentically represented instead of just saying, oh, I think it'd be awesome and trendy to have a deaf character in this show because I think it'd be awesome to see ASL. There's so much more to that many people don't realize. And it makes it tough as an actress to figure out what they want too.
Well, that's where you have to have, and you should have, whether it's another writer on the staff or whether it's an interpreter, whether it's somebody who knows ASL, you need to have somebody go, that's not quite accurate. Somebody needs to be able to speak up and say that. Now, here's the other thing I wanted to say. Like any good writer, why should a deaf writer just write deaf characters? Why shouldn't a deaf writer who knows story write a story? So I would say that the other side of that is that I don't want to say, well, gee, we have a deaf character. So that's why we'll hire a deaf writer. Yes, of course. But if I have a great writer who's deaf, who I still, let's say, who can still sit in a room and be part of the process, who's a great writer, good for me. Now I have a great writer. And again, by the way, how cool would it be to have a great writing team? Let's assume for just a moment that you two are writers. I mean, you're a great team. You have different sensibilities, you and Carly. You're able to, if Carly has something she wants to say, you're her voice. She's still her own person. We still look to Carly and go, and Carly can say, that doesn't work. Here's why it doesn't work. Or here's an idea, and it's coming through you, Sarah. Great.
That's an interesting perspective, because it's interesting because I wouldn't want to be her voice. I would want her to be her own voice and me to be my own voice. So I would love the opportunity to have an interpreter with her so she can feel separate from me, if that makes sense. Because once I start voicing for her, she loses herself. And many people don't realize, like, wait, is that really coming from Carly or is it just Sarah? So that puts me in a really hard position. And the barrier with her really getting through to people without me.
That's okay. That's like I'm applauding, because that's really cool, because that's something that every writer on any show and any showrunner should know immediately. That's something. There's a perfect example. I've done this a long time. Never did I think that. And that's why not? Why shouldn't it be that? So if in fact there's a partnership of writers, one of whom speaks and one of whom doesn't, you're right. It shouldn't be Sarah speaking for Carly. It should be that Jenny is now stuck in that writer's room, which, by the way, would drive Jenny nuts, I'm sure. But yeah, Jenny would be Carly's voice. And that's so funny, because that's what I said earlier, which is that's Carly's voice to me. Jenny speaking is Carly's voice. And you're right, Sarah, it shouldn't be the partner's voice. So this is fascinating to me. So if in fact, and I wonder if they're out there, partners, one of whom, whether both are deaf, but one can speak, what would the hiring situation be? Because again, here's the weird part about all that. It's money. It's financial. Who gets paid? Every staff right now, the money has gone from this to this, meaning everybody's getting cheaper with what they're paying their writers. So let's assume for just a moment we have partners, and let's assume for just a moment that one of our partners needs an interpreter, needs someone who knows ASL, who can be his or her or their voice. So you're right. Does the interpreter get a salary as well? I don't know. Fascinating. Because if a studio says we can't afford that, well, then we may lose great writers because of it.
Yeah. And I think that's my biggest frustration coming into the entertainment industry for me, because they say, well, we don't have the budget or we don't have the money. That makes me feel like a not worthy person, because I have things that I can contribute to your story. Plus, it's not just me that needs the interpreter. They think I need the interpreter. No, you need the interpreter too, because you are losing all the information that you need to know from me. So the interpreter is there for the both of us. So it's not just for me. And to watch many other, filmmakers willing to hire a makeup artist, they're willing to hire a costume designer, a planter to make sure the set looks beautiful, but yet they cannot afford an interpreter, which is what we need more. Those other things they could figure out a different budget for those other things, but making this a priority so that this person can be part of set. And again, I understand sometimes the budget can be a big issue, but it feels they just don't think twice to consider how that could make a deaf person or the deaf community feel. You're writing about a deaf character. You don't write one if you can't even provide the accommodations for one. So you have to make sure that you have the budget to provide accommodations and what you have on set to write about a deaf character in your story, period. There's no other way that you can do this.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I agree. And yet, it's a problem. because it is a problem out there and again, I hear it in a lot of different ways. This is another very interesting one. Look, I'm sure it happens with actors with disabilities, actors who are in wheelchairs, actors who, and I did a showcase many, many, many years ago, which was the Actors with Disabilities showcase, and it was fascinating to be a part of it. I did my scene with a wonderful actress named Nancy Becker Kennedy. I hope these people don't mind me mentioning their names because it was lovely. And she had been in a wheelchair, and we did a scene together, and it was all these scenes done for executives to go, oh, look, open up your eyes to the fact that there are actors out there who are different, but who are equally as capable. It's hard because we're not going to be able to convince everybody. And yet, this is an idea, a show that does at its core have, again, even if it's one deaf character, you still need to have that person needs to be on equal footing with everybody else in the damn show. It just does. That person has to be able to air their grievances, air their concerns in a way that any actor who's on the set has the ability to do. And by the way, I have to say it works in reverse as well, which is that there comes a point where we have to tell our actors, all of them, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. We've talked about it. We've debated it. We get it. But this is how the story has to work. And that's collaboration and that's compromise. That's part of the deal too. But yeah, most importantly is that you have to feel worthy, certainly. And to make you feel less than that is just wrong. And it's just, again, it's short-sighted thinking.
And it's amazing too, because we live in such a beautiful, diverse world. It's not black and white. There's so many colors within our world, yet on the media platform, is still one or the other. We haven't seen that normalization. And it's been a topic that keeps coming up with this season so far with all our interviews. The idea of normalizing diversity, normalizing disability, normalizing what we already see in the world, and how to get to that point. Because I feel like we do acknowledge it. We see that there are issues. We see that there are things that need to be improved on within the industry. But how? What are the stepping stones? Is it by having these kinds of conversations right now? Is it by reaching out to huge, big platforms and talking with them? What is that step to help improve the media, to show them a world that is already happening that's so colorful?
Well, look, it's an uphill battle for sure anyway. This is the way to do it. This open dialogue that allows it. Because like I said, executives, buyers out there, not so much sellers, because sellers are always trying to come up with something that feels different, feels unique, feels like it hasn't been done before. Buyers are going, well, how are we going to do that so that it actually becomes an actual series that can last for years? I think it's why it's so much easier for sellers, for studios and networks to go, oh no, we're okay with having a character who's deaf, but having a whole show, well, that's different. You know what I'm saying? They go with the easier route. Now, if that's the case, you've seen that there are shows that do that. There are shows that are beginning to have a character who is, whether it's an actor with a disability or whatever it might be, they're doing it. They're trying on different shows. Those are baby steps. Who is going to be, where is it going to come from? And in the world of streaming, it's easier because you're not talking about doing 23 episodes. You're talking about doing maybe 8, maybe 10, maybe 6, who knows, of a series. And then I think that way it may be easier for buyers to go, let's take a risk. Let's take a chance. Let's go for it. Let's go for it. And I think that's what you have to, that's the way it has to be. And you have to kind of keep pounding on those doors, I think.
One of the things that I love about our conversations on and off camera is you give us the opportunity to really express what we want to talk about. And because we lack the experience of writing or talking about like how to showcase our stories and our journeys, to have someone like you who's had so much experience to help guide us. I can only imagine if we had other deaf writers or deaf people who want to be involved in the entertainment industry, or anyone with any kind of disability that just wants to have their stories be told, to have someone like you or a showrunner or whoever the right fit is that has the experience that they lack, to really encourage them and help them out to get to that point where they feel that they can really reveal their stories and showcase it too.
I think they're, first off, thank you. I don't know. I would do this in a second for any, I love, part of my life now is teaching, is to give back, is to pay it forward. That's something that is just really important to me. So I have a twofold answer. First and foremost, we were all inexperienced once. I didn't know much about writing, but what I say to young writers is, here's how you get better. Keep writing, make mistakes, learn structure, read lots of scripts, watch things that you love, and learn how structure works. You're only going to be inexperienced until you're not. You know what I mean? That's right. You are new to it, but you do also know certain things that you know, stories that you want to tell. And again, the way we tell those stories is we always look to make them. And again, this is a battle that every writer has, and every writer has to learn. You don't want to make anything that feels cliched, that feels like, and again, there are plenty of stories that I've told that I know are way too, they're universal, of course, but they feel very cliched, like I've seen them a million times. Your stories, almost immediately, we realize, are not cliched. They may be universal to your life and to your experiences, but to a viewing audience, they haven't seen them yet. That's why I still so strongly believe in what you're doing. And so you have to look at it and go, yeah, we're inexperienced. We get it. But we won't always be, and we're going to keep learning. And so I would say to you, watch and learn, read and learn, look at the stuff that's recommended to you. And by the way, I would talk to any group of writers, hearing or not, who want to just talk about writing. I don't know if I could ever teach writing, because I can teach acting, weirdly enough, but teaching writing is a little bit of a different animal. I've done it. I teach at Pace University. I'm an adjunct professor there. And so I teach a course, a credit, sort of the actor and their collaboration with writers is kind of what my course is. And it's the actor as a writer. That's where I kind of come from, because writing is something that, yes, it can be learned for sure. But just doing it makes you better, because so many writers, so many brand new writers do what I did when I first started writing. As an actor, I went, oh, I'm just going to start. First off, I don't need an outline. I'm just going to start writing a story. And trust me, about 15, 20 pages in, you're going, where do I go? What do I do? I don't know where I'm going. That's the problem you can't do. You have to have an outline. And secondarily, as an actor, we love big speeches. We love to just write so that we can, we're going to be so eloquent and this is going to get us that Emmy. And we forget, no, we can't write gigantic speeches for an actor. Very few writers can get away with that. You need to simplify. You need to write in ways that it's the old get into a scene as late as you can and get out of a scene as quickly as you can. It sounds maybe a little bit like, what does that mean? Well, it means like if you write a scene and you start with, Sarah is making dinner and she's cooking and she's making pasta with a sauce. There's a knock at the door. She walks over to open it and it's Carly. All we want to say is Sarah's making dinner, door knocks, she goes to open it, it's Carly. Because everything else isn't important. You'll come up with it. Your director will work it unless it's specific to the story you're telling, which is that Sarah is making a dinner for that special someone who's coming over and is panicked because this is the first time she's ever tried to make this recipe. Now it's about something. Now there's a reason to start a scene that early. But in most cases, no. All that stuff just goes away, and you'll start with a knock at the door, and she opens it, and there's her friend Carly at the door.
I feel like I just took a writing 101 class.
Right?
Well, it's really true. Here's another way you do it. You go, Sarah, there's a knock at the door. Sarah comes out of her bedroom, quickly putting on a robe, goes to the door, opens it. It's Carly. And Carly goes, hey, and Sarah goes, and it's why? There's somebody I have somebody here. Now you know there's something, now there's a reason why you start the scene with Sarah coming out, putting on a robe, getting to the door. It just all depends what your story is and what the content of the scene is. And if the scene is about, oh my God, that guy who we met at the bar, that's who's here. Oh my God, that's when it becomes something different. Am I touching on something real? I probably am. I'm sorry.
And a perfect example of a hearing writer, I would never knock on the door. I would text her.
Oh my God, that's funny. But yes, because if your character on the other side, if Sarah can't hear the door, see, that's what I mean. That's fan-frickin-tastic. There you go. Now that was writing 101 for me, you see?
See, this is why we're having this dialogue right now, to inspire you and you inspire us. Oh, that's so funny.
That's fascinating. By the way, that's really important for when you're pitching a series. That's what you talk about. You talk about little things like that. Like, there's no knocking at doors. There's no knocking on doors. Unless the character is a hearing person on the other side who can hear the door knock. No, it's a text. But that's the things that we learn. That's the thing, you're right, where I would need to have somebody slap me metaphorically and say, Nat, you're not going to knock at a door because the person can't hear the knock on the door. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, again, that's my short-sighted thing as a writer, because I'm not thinking, oh, the character I was just pitching couldn't hear. No, I was just pitching that I assumed that she could. But you're right. That's what makes it so interesting when you are writing characters who are more unique and different than what you've experienced and written before. That's the changes that writers have to make. I'm going to remember that. Thank you for teaching me something. Now I'm learning. I thought I was done learning.
And that's another reason. Nope. You never stop learning. Also, another reason why we wanted to have this as a production company is because you mentioned how important it is for people to continue taking classes and continue learning. And a lot of times the classes that are provided within the entertainment industry, they don't have interpreters. So if I wanted to become an actor or an actress and I wanted to take the class, well, do they have the budget to provide an interpreter? I don't know. So that's another burden for me, or responsibility for me as a deaf person who wants to be a part of the entertainment industry and learn about writing, producing, and directing. I have to figure out on my end the accessibility to these classes so that me as a deaf person, I can learn. And that's why we want to have our production company, to give deaf people the opportunity to be a part of the entertainment industry without the burden of asking for an interpreter, without the burden of explaining the accommodations that they need. We want to be the production company where we say, okay, you want to take an acting class? Great. We'll get an interpreter for you. Here you go. And set them on their way. We want to make the job easier on the deaf community. And so the more that we have deaf people be a part of the entertainment industry because of the accessibility that they're going to have.
Wait, again, that's so interesting to me. Does that not exist? If you wanted, Carly, I'll use you as an example. If you wanted to take an acting class, couldn't you?
I haven't tried. To be honest, I haven't asked, but maybe some of them will say that they can, but they're not quite sure what their budget is for interpreters, or they don't know where to find an interpreter. So they typically, they'll put the burden on me to search for an interpreter, and they'll put the burden on me to figure out the budget. So it depends on what kind of acting classes they have or what company they're under.
Let's just assume for just a moment that you wanted to take an acting class. You found a great one. And it's a regular acting class with people in it who can't hear. if you just have a friend, or in this case, Jenny, who has to move out here, of course, then to be a part of this, and who has to give up her own life, of course. Or no, I'm kidding. Who has to give up a couple hours and he has to give up a couple hours in an evening to be your interpreter. Why couldn't you come to an acting class? You're the one who's paying. In other words, if you pay your $200, $250, whatever it is for the month, you're in. And yes, you'd have to supply, and you would anyway, I think, your interpreter. You'd have to have somebody who says, yeah, I'm going to go and I want to. You're nodding like that would not be the case, that a class would say no.
No. So generally, the deaf person is not responsible to bring an interpreter. The company is who's responsible. So I don't know what an acting class looks like. So suppose in a university, the university is responsible for paying for that. So again, Jenny has a family and a home to afford, feed her children. I'm not using Jenny for free to interpret all the way. Interpreters and interpreting is a career and it's a salary for them to make. Therefore, I also don't have the budget to afford her. It's not my job as a deaf person. I didn't ask to become deaf. So it's not my responsibility to pay a salary for an interpreter to help me. So it's the company's responsibility. So if they know that they have a deaf person within their class, they should be able to provide an interpreter and they should have a budget to hire the interpreter on their end. I just show up to class just like any other hearing person in class. I sign in, log in, watch class, and I'm done. Just like a hearing person can.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. I can see
it doesn't happen all the time.
No, it won't. And I think, like, if you're talking about a university setting, I get it. You're right. In a university setting where there are students who are coming from all over the place to come into this class, that does make sense. I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of you've come out here to be an actor in Hollywood. You want to act. You want to be in an acting class. Well, like anybody else who comes into let's assume I had an acting class. And the fee to be in the class is $150 a month. And Carly comes to the class and says, I'd like to be in it. I would say, sure. But and this is different than a university. As a teacher who is teaching acting, and it's such an interesting thing, I'm saying this for the very first time out loud, I suppose I would debate or even say, I can't hire an interpreter for you to be in my acting class. This is interesting because I've never thought about this ever. University wise, I get it. There should be something in place. But for this crazy business out here, where all of us are individuals and all of us are coming with our own, look, it's funny. I'll say it this way. I'm purposely being dorky when I say this. You get an actor who comes to your acting class who isn't good. They're not talented, but they want to act. So you say to them, all right, pay your $150 and we'll do and you never say to somebody, you can't act. At least I don't. But if a person comes to an acting class and it's open to everybody and there's no experience necessary, well, I'm taking on all sorts of people, but but if I am doing that, I'm taking them on and going, well, I have a big hill to climb with them because they're not particularly good. Let's assume for just a moment, Carly comes and Carly is expressive and interesting and hasn't acted before, but that's a different animal, but it's the same thing. I can't go, well, I have to find an interpreter and pay for an interpreter for Carly to be in the class. She's going to be in the class. And I would never say, don't come to my class, come and experience it and learn. But I don't think I could say, I'm going to pay for an interpreter to be there for you. And that's really kind of fascinating. Again, something I've never thought about. Does that make sense?
So no, it does make total sense. And that's the biggest reason. And that's where the huge gap is within the entertainment industry, because we often don't have accommodations to or access to a lot of things. And they keep telling us, hey, well, you could try this, this, or this. Yes, I want to, but there's not an interpreter. Who's going to pay for it? I don't have the budget for it. You don't have the budget for it. So how do we work together and make this happen? And understanding, yes, budget can be the biggest reason, but You can't tell me to continue learning and try all these things if I can't get accessibility in the first place. So it is a huge gap and it's contradicting. And that's within the entertainment industry.
Boy, it's a vicious circle. It is, because I've never thought about that. And it's funny because I can't imagine that there haven't been actors who are deaf who haven't pursued acting classes. I have to assume that they have, but I don't know what the logistics of the classes have been.
I mean, I am a part of an acting class, but I don't have an interpreter. And I suffer in the end of it because I don't get the full experience because I miss out on a lot of what's being said. Because I would love to have an interpreter for my acting class, but I don't because it's not within their budget to do it. And I'm like, okay, so I suffer the consequences. I don't get the full experience that all my other acting friends get. And it's unfortunate that that is the standard, the norm. And I have the privilege of being able to hear and talk. And I have so many of my friends who don't have that privilege and they won't have access ever to an acting class because they can't afford an interpreter. And the classes won't provide one because of the budget reasons, because acting classes in general, they don't make a lot of money. It's for the passion. But then we completely neglect wonderful people who want to get better, but don't have the accessibility to do so. And that's a huge, unfortunate gap that we're trying so hard to figure out how to fill too.
Okay, now I have a question for you, Sarah. Because again, this is fascinating to me. I've never, and I'm certain I am the norm. When you were in your acting class, what are the things that for you fall through the cracks that you can specifically speak to? Is it that the teacher, this is my question, if the teacher is speaking to you about a scene that he or she or they have watched you play, and you don't understand something that they're saying or you miss something, don't you have the right? The answer is yes, you should, to say, I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat it?
I do that. So one-on-one, if I'm doing a scene and I get notes from my teacher, I'm usually assigned, but it's in the beginning of class when we talk about warm-ups, or if there's another student doing a monologue or a scene and they're getting notes from the teacher who's sitting in the front, I can't read that person's lips. I can't understand the students. If they're talking in the background, I don't know who's talking. It's dark in the theater, so I can't really understand. So I lose the opportunity to really get my money's worth of the class and really grow as an actor because I'm lacking my access because I decided, okay, I don't need an interpreter because I know it's not within their budget. And so one-on-one, I'm fine, but I'm missing the warm-ups. I'm missing the connection with my classmates, with the teacher, understanding their notes. And so it's always something that I just kind of stare blankly and feel the energy, and then that's it. So I lose that opportunity.
I am so fascinated. I love that I'm part of this with you guys because these are things I don't think about. So my first question to you, this is what I would do, but again, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just me just being naive. I would shift my seat so that I can watch the teacher. I can be in a position where I'm not sitting in the back in the dark, where I am sitting, and I would add, especially if it's a class where you are in the minority. In other words, there are no other actors who can't hear. I would say, may I sit in a spot where I can watch and hear and be able to read lips or whatever it is. Do you ever do that?
Oh, that's unfortunately, again, as an actor walking into class, the first thing I do is, where do I need to sit? That's for me. Where do I need to put myself in the position? I'm already thinking there's so many things that go on in my head where I can never let go and just be an actor and just focus on the training and the learning. I have to figure out where I need to sit. Where's the best place for me to look at the teacher? Where are the students? Are they talking? What are they saying? I have to move my seat to be closer. There's so many things, and it becomes frustrating for me because I can't just let go. And when the teacher says, okay, now everyone close your eyes, take a deep breath, listen to my voice, I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I can't really get into class because I'm also afraid to ask, like, I don't understand. I don't want to disrupt the class. I don't want to be that burden that I already feel inside when I first walk into the class. And
Wow.
it's so hard because like I want to get better. And there's so many other people who want to get better as actors who are deaf, but they never have that opportunity and they feel afraid to ask because we always have that feeling of rejection or, nah, I'm sorry, we don't have the budget. It makes me feel like I'm less than, like, oh, I'm not as important as these other able bodied actors who can just show up and be like, I'm taking a class and have their money worth of the class.
Wow.
But then they want to write about a deaf character and say that there's not enough deaf actors out there and they have to find somebody to put on a deaf character. It's like, well, and you're not saying why.
This is so important. This is great. This is great. And here's the other side of that. What you also don't want to have is to go, I just want to be in an acting class that has all deaf actors. Well, that just limits you then. You don't want to have that, even though that acting class would have the money for an interpreter, because that would be the very first thing that the teacher who's teaching that class would want. Or better, they are signed. They are able to sign, so the teacher can. But then it limits you as an actor. You want to be with other actors. It doesn't matter if an actor can't hear. So it's fascinating. And it's not, boy, I don't have the answers. Those are great. I know. And when Carly says, so this is the vicious cycle, you as showrunners, as creators, would love to have more deaf characters, but gee whiz, we can't find the actors to fill those spots. And then you realize it's because the actors who would fill those spots aren't really able to work on their own technique, aren't able to get better, aren't able to grow as actors because they can't get into a class. That's fascinating. It's fascinating.
And
I don't.
it's just, and I don't think there's an answer yet. Again, it's a conversation that's happening right now that makes this put into the spotlight and gets people thinking too. The biggest thing that I really just would love to take away from anyone who's listening is just making us feel like we're human beings. If we say that, hey, I want to take an acting class, I walk into your room, or I want to take a writing class. So my favorite thing that I would love for someone to say is, what do you need from me? Like, what do you need from me? Instead of the deaf person having to be like, well, I want to take a class, but I need this, this, and this. Turn the tables and have that hearing person who's the teacher of the class be like, okay, tell me what you need. And I know that's not easy. And I know maybe that person doesn't have the answers, but it humanizes us and it makes us feel like I'm welcome. I'm able to do it instead of feeling like that burden. And we haven't gotten to that point yet. And again, it all starts with a conversation. It starts with just planting that seed in someone's mind to be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Now, how can I improve? So it's something that we're so passionate about changing and educating and learning and making this a beautiful place for people to really grow and flourish in this industry.
What is What the Deaf Season 2?
We are bringing to light the conversations within the entertainment industry and hearing and deaf actors, entertainers, anyone under the sun of the entertainment industry. We're getting their perspective and opening up the dialogue of how to improve this space for all and make it safe and make it a positive one. So we're hearing from deaf people within the industry and also hearing people, which has never been done before. We've never opened the dialogue to both worlds to get all perspectives.
Again, I love having these conversations because I know our listeners are probably listening to this and, realizing those small things like you just realized about the interpreter and the access to classes. So maybe these listeners are teachers, and the next time a deaf person reaches out and wants to take their class, they're more thoughtful of how to respond, knowing that there's no solution. I get it. But how you respond back to a deaf person makes a huge difference. I'm telling you, if they say, hey, I can't afford an interpreter, it instantly kills my confidence of becoming an interpreter. It's like, you know what? Okay, fine. There's no point on working together with you. But if they say, hey, okay, never done this before, how can I work with you? budget wise, just having that open conversation makes me feel included. And the more that happens, the more willing I am to put forth effort to make this work. So the listeners that are listening in, hearing these things, it makes a difference, and hoping that they respond to people in the entertainment industry differently. And knowing that we live in a diverse world.
Agree with Carly, and I really appreciate the time that you spent with us to really be vulnerable and have the tough discussions, because it's not easy. It's very hard to like figure this out and just be open and learn and accept us and just really dive in.
It's for anybody who wants the business that they're in to be a better business. This is important. I mean, it's so funny. It gets me thinking, and it does start to think. And they're look, under the umbrella of this world, there are the television series that absolutely have the budget to not only hire actors who can't hear, but to treat them as absolutely equal partners in this play that we're doing, in this world that we're living in. University settings are very different than LA class settings. They are. So there are going to be answers that are going to kind of fluctuate based on what it is you're talking about. In a perfect world, an acting class in Los Angeles has a teacher who knows sign language, who says, my class is open to everyone. Everyone. And if in fact you come as an actor who's been living in the deaf community, you're going to be treated on equal footing. I'm going to demand, great work from you, but I'm also going to demand of myself, great work for myself, so that you get the benefits of what I teach. And by the way, as we all know, not all teachers are good. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately. We just have to, but you find those teachers who are good, you can walk away and go, I really learned something. And sometimes it's the classes themselves. That's why I think it's really important to be in really good acting classes that are intimidating, that push you to be better. You don't want to be in an acting class with actors who are brand spanking new, because you want to be pushed. You want to get into that class and go, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to really step up my game. But you don't want to be limited by the fact that you can't hear the teacher teaching us and doing an assignment, that you can't hear the feedback that an actor on stage has just heard. So I don't know. For me, there are things that are easy to fix, and then there are things that are tricky to fix.
Yeah. But it all starts with a conversation like this, Nat. We really appreciate you taking the time and effort to really talk with us about this. And for our listeners, it's been a really eye-opening experience, and I hope they've taken something amazing from this conversation with you. So we really appreciate having you on What the Deaf.
I am so honored, and I am so grateful. You know how much I love you. That is not an unknown. And Carly's heard me say this to her as well. You guys are spectacular. And whatever I can do as we move forward, find me. I'm kind of easy to find. Kind of right here in front of my computer most of the time now. That's what I'm doing. So
Perfect. Well, thanks, Nat, for everything. And to our listeners, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at questions@whatthedeaf.com.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at What the Deaf.
Until next week. Bye, guys.
Bye. We would like to thank dpan.tv and their services at aslcaptions.com for making the transcripts and captions of this podcast accessible for everyone.
If you're looking for captioning or transcript services, they do amazing work.